Good morning, everyone. My name is Renier Low. I am from the Cape Agulhas municipality. I am the coordinator for special projects in the Human Development Department, and I would like to welcome everyone to our webinar on the 13th of August. So I hope we have good luck today. We don't have any technical challenges, you know. So I would like again to say welcome to all of you, each and every one of you, for making the time to be part of the discussion. Today, it is our climate change webinar under the theme, Climate Change and the Impact on the Livelihoods of Women. And it is a big topic. I'm not sure how many of you guys saw the report that came out, which it was a study that was done regarding, I think decades of the issues of climate change. And I think today we have a special guest of panelists that will try to unpack for us where we are in terms of the climate change discussion. So guys, I will not be doing the official welcoming. It's just to get us started. After this, I will hand over to our Youth Council Chairperson, Shade Williams, just to do the official welcoming. I know we have people from all across South Africa, different provinces, different parts of the world. So guys, it's such an honor to be hosting this webinar from the most southern tip of Africa. So we are from the most southern tip. Beyond here, there's no more roads, it's sea, it's not Cape Point, Ferrell. It is Cape Agulhas. So once again, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. I'm pretty sure that you guys have been you're all excited about today. We've been doing a lot of preparations, lots of meetings, just to get us to this point. And I'm privileged to be part of something as great as this. So I will just hand over to our chairperson, Shade Williams, to do the official welcoming and opening.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Shade Williams, chairperson of Cape Agulhas Youth Council. And this morning, I just want to thank everybody for taking part in this climate change webinar. A warm welcome to all our panelists and our moderator and everyone who's watching. Today, we are looking at the impact on the livelihoods of our women. And thank all the women on the panel for being part, and we thank you for your time and your willingness to participate. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this webinar, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys are all welcomed and you feel welcome. Yeah, we have various organizations in the house today. I know we have PLAS, Institute for Land and Agrarian Studies. We have Western Cape Department of Agriculture. We have Cape Nature. We have Department of Environmental Affairs, Development and Planning. We have Overberg Development Association, the Cape Agulhas Municipality, and I think I didn't miss anyone, I hope. And also Brit, you're the one that's not representing an organization. You are a freelancer. I thought Brit was from NMMU, but thank you very much to everyone that joined in the organizations and also the guests in the room. I hope you guys will be able to enjoy the discussion today. So guys, the purpose of today is to answer some questions. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't really think about, or communities don't really take climate change as something that affects me. So the panelists today will try to answer these questions. Where are we in terms of the climate change discussion? Where are we? What's happening? Also, who's leading this discussion? And at which level should the discussion start? What are our civic, academic, and government organizations doing to mitigate the impact of climate change, especially in rural areas? How does climate change impact women in the various sectors of society? And also, what options are there for women and what support should be provided? And we will also be looking at What are the practical examples or case studies in communities that have been done? And I don't have all the answers. And that's why we have an esteemed panel of experts, people working in the field, writing in the field. And we will be looking in terms of, how are we going to move forward? How are we going to influence policy? What programs are we going to be implemented? Stakeholders that need to be brought to the table. How are we going to do that? So that is what we're going to be discussing today. And I'm looking forward to the presentations and also the inputs from the various sectors and people really working in this field. So what I will do now, I will hand over to Deirdre Barends to take discussions further. So Deirdre, over to you.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone, and all the viewers out there. Thank you, Renier, for this platform. I think we should really commend ourselves and tap ourselves on the back, especially Cape Agulhas Municipality, for starting this conversation around climate change. I think it is a discussion that really needs serious attention, but it is something very often just brushed and swept under the carpet, and we think, no, this is just globally that these things are happening, and it doesn't really affect us on a local level. But whether we like it or not, we're beginning to confront the impact of climate change more often, and it's hitting more closer to home than we would like to. So just to introduce myself to all the viewers out there, I am Deirdre Barends, responsible for social development based at the Overberg District Municipality, and I will be your moderator for today. And really, I would encourage everybody to take part in this conversation. Like I said, it is something that we don't often have access to. Especially women in our rural communities, that we not often get the opportunity to voice our views and our feelings and how this really impacts on our livelihoods and how it affects us on a daily basis. Hence the platform created for this. So this is two-folded. As part of celebrating Women's Month, we also zoom in a bit in terms of how does these things affect the lives of women in our communities. So we have a panel of presenters, and they are really handpicked today. And what we will do is, before I just introduce you to the entire panel, I think there's, in terms of the discussions that will take place, what we will do is we will allow the presenters to just take us through their presentations. And I would encourage our viewers to just jot down any questions for clarity and concerns that they have as they go along. After the last speaker, we will open up for discussion. And again, I'm really encouraging the viewers to pose their questions, to make those notes, because what happens today will determine as to where we will follow tomorrow. And if we do not get questions, if we don't participate in this discussion, then it means that yet we have been alerted to the situation that we find ourselves in, but we are not prepared or ready to take the extra step, realizing very well that each and every one of us do have a role to play in climate change. It is not just something that happens somewhere in Ukraine. It's not just something that happens in the USA. It happens close to home, and each of us have a distinct role to play. So as part of the panelists today, we have 6 of the panelists, and the one is Britt that Renier referred to earlier on, and she is currently a freelance researcher. And we also have Lizeth Smith, the Manager for Human Development at Cape Agulhas Municipality. And then we have Bonuswa Kekwana. She is a Stakeholder Engagement Officer at Cape Nature. We also have on the panel with us today, Tracy Lee Dennis, and she is currently a PhD candidate at the University of the Western Cape, based at the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies. We also have Faith Chiumbiri, working at the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. And last but not least, we have Vanessa Barnes-Jones, who is a resource economist based at the Western Cape Department of Agriculture. So if you just hear and listen to the fields selected and where these people's specialities lay, you can know that they are seriously just handpicked based on their interest, based on their passion as far as climate change is concerned. Now, before I hand over to our first speaker, who is Brit for the day and who will basically contextualize our discussion for today, I would like to introduce her formally. And again, to the viewers out there, please, please, please keep your pen and paper ready, make notes, and because it's important that we begin to take hands and realize that each of us have a responsibility in terms of making our lives better, impacting on whatever is happening in our communities around ourselves. So Brit is from Kaberga in the Eastern Cape, and she has a background in adult and community education, which includes teaching, curriculum development, writing of materials in plain language versions. And there was specifically a booklet on the ecological crisis, climate change, that was titled, "What has a polar bear got to do with me? Why respecting and saving the environment is a justice issue which affects us all." She is a freelance researcher who has worked in the NGO and higher education sectors, in education and development studies, and she holds a master's degree in adult education from the University of KZN. And her research interests include the theory and practice of work, non-formal education, and informal learning, as well as eco-pedagogy. So, Brit, I would like to hand over to you so that you can just take us through why are we here today? And why is it important that we start this discussion? And why is it important that we also realize that these things affect us on a local level as well, and that synergy and whatever is needed. And like I'm saying, we will allow all the speakers to do their presentations, and after that, we will open the floor for questions and answers. Over to you, Brit. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much. I'm actually going to start my presentation with a very short video, which is a video part of a series called Polluters and Plunderers, The Roots of Africa's Crises, made by an organization called WOMAN, which is an African Gender and Extractives Alliance, which is based in Johannesburg. I'm also, just before we start, I'm having a little bit of a technical problem. So Rainier is going to do my PowerPoint, the technical side. And so if everyone can just bear with us, that I just will have to keep saying next so that he knows when to change the slide. So we'll start with the video. Thanks. Okay, thanks, Rania. If you could just share your screen, please. Rania?
I'm just going to share the screen now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to begin. I was thinking of how I could do this presentation, and there were two things that sort of sprung to mind. The one being the Olympics, and the other being dates. And even though those may not have anything to do with each other, those are kind of run through my presentation. I titled my presentation, "It's Not a Marathon, It's a Sprint, and We Are Out of Time." As you can see there, I've chosen some photographs of the recent Olympics held in Tokyo. Next. I'm sure that all of you know that this was the hottest Olympics ever. Next. So the 9th of August 2021, important for two reasons. In South Africa, it was Women's Day, but it was also the release of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. Probably, well, definitely a report with the starkest warning to date, because this is not the first of their reports, but definitely the one that has made many of us catch a big wake up. Next. The first, the reports actually date back to 1988, when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was first established by the United Nations Environment Programme and the World Meteorological Organization. This was the same year that James Hansen, who's known as the father of climate change awareness, said in a congressional committee that something called the greenhouse effect was causing global warming. Now, for me, these are very interesting dates because it's actually 33 years ago. Next. 1988 to 2021 is 33 years. So this is actually not something new, even though for many of us it is something new. If you look back in history, you can actually go as far back as 1912. This is a newspaper article from New Zealand. And if you look at the last line, warning about carbon dioxide, the effect may be considerable in a few centuries. And so here we sit, many of us caught off guard. But the point, and why I wanted to talk about the date specifically, is this is actually not a new thing. We have had warnings for many, many years. Next. So just briefly, what is climate change? These terms are often used interchangeably, but I found this to be a very easy definition. Climate change is not the same as interannual climate variability. It's not a natural thing. It's a result of global warming, which is caused by human activities. And this now, in the latest IPCC report, conclusively blames humans for this, resulting in the emission of various pollutants, mostly carbon dioxide, but there are others. And it's altered the Earth system dynamics in a way that affects the climate system. And therefore, we have all these very strange and terrible weather conditions and other things such as floods, etc. Next. So back to my theme of numbers, the world is about 1 degree Celsius warmer than before widespread industrialization. A temperature rise of 2 degrees C had long been regarded as the gateway to dangerous warming, but more recently scientists say that 1.5 degrees is safer. So not only are we hot, but we're also in hot water, because the IPCC report warns global warming will hit 1.5 degrees C's by 2040. So I'm not sure the ages of everybody, but many of us will be around in 2040. So what they say is, without immediate, rapid and large-scale reductions in emissions, curbing global warming to either 1.5 or even 2 above pre-industrial levels by 2100 will be beyond reach. Next. Okay, so some more events, my Olympic theme, some more events in 2021. These are just not as exciting as the Olympics. These are very recent events, all this year. In China, there was an unprecedented downpour that dumped a year's worth of rain in 3 days. Western Canada has had a heat dome. Western Europe, devastating floods after torrential rain. Southern Europe, nightmarish summer, wildfires in Greece and Turkey. California, raging wildfires. And then something that the climate scientists are very worried about, Greenland's ice sheet has experienced a massive melting event during a heat wave. Okay, next. So we could say, well, what does this mean for us in Africa? We are a million miles away. I termed my booklet, What has a polar bear got to do with me? Because here we are miles away from all of this, but actually no, that is not correct at all. At the moment in North Africa, Algeria, we've got wildfires ravaging forests and villages. In Tunisia, on the 10th of August, a record high, once again, not quite as good as the Olympics, but a record of 48 degrees Celsius at midday. That was this week. And then closer to us in Uganda, in this particular region, Rwenzori, they are trying to protect themselves from landslides and floods by digging trenches, planting trees. But I want to draw everyone's attention really to the last line, which says, adaptation works based on soil conservation are proving to be increasingly useless in the wake of these extreme weather events. So we really are in a crisis. That was taken from the BBC World Service, dated 8th August. So this is right now. Next. We do know with the climate change crisis that those who suffer it and will continue to suffer it did not cause it. And I tried to capture this just with some visuals, but we don't really have time to go into all of them. But if you just take a moment to have a look at what's going on, which I actually like to term more the ecological crisis. Next. Okay, so who caused it? If it wasn't us in the global south, who did this? Well, the blame is the global economic system. It's human activity, and I want to actually focus on the last bit of human, which is man. And I hope that I'm not going to cause a big debate, but that's okay if I do. But actually, statistically, men have been larger contributors to climate change than women. So whilst it is caused by human activity, it's actually mostly, if you look back in history from the Industrial Revolution, mostly men. The free market economic system costs the earth. We pay for it. The idea that we have to have growth at all costs is that the kind of growth, the sort of casino shopping mall growth is part of an unequal system of exploitation of poor and working class people, women, people of color, entire ecosystems. It's a system that makes a few people rich, leaves the majority of people materially poor, and it depletes natural resources as it keeps extracting and taking, and threatens and destroys plant and animal life. Next. And if we want to get more specific, this is a report in 2017. Scientists estimate that emissions from just 90 companies contributed nearly 50% of the rise in global mean surface temperature since the end of the Industrial Revolution. If we could go to the bottom of that slide, 83 of these companies produce coal, oil, and natural gas, the remaining 7 cement manufacturers. So we can actually say exactly who they are. Next. I think this is a very powerful quote from a former Maldives president, so representing the global south by saying, "We are paying with our lives for the carbon someone else emitted." Next. So we did not cause it, but we can't ignore it because we live it. And I think this particular quote captures it, that we cannot have a collective negligence of the climate crisis, even if we weren't the ones that caused it, because it is the entirety of the biophysical world of which we are part. It is the physical battleground in which every issue is played out, and it is crumbling. So we really don't have a choice. We are in it and we have to do something about it. Next. What might we experience here in the global south, in Africa, in South Africa? Water shortages. I live in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. We are facing day 0. An inability to produce food, homes destroyed, people displaced, the climate refugees, deaths, further health crises. I don't think I have time to go into COVID, and I know the jury's out on where the origins come from, but we have been warned by climate scientists for many years about zoonotic viruses. But I know the jury's out on COVID, so let me just leave it there. Conflict over scarce resources. So if we continue to ignore this and say it's not our problem, this is what we may face. Next. So what can we do? It's a difficult one. We definitely cannot return to business as usual. And I think it seems to be that after lockdown, that is exactly what people are trying to do. We can't do that. There are things we can do, but even the things we can do as individuals have limitations. And so I'd just like to share these 2 quotes about that. I always tell my students that if they want real change, they need to be more active politically. And by the way, that's not party politics there, that's the bigger meaning. That designing greener products is good, but a bit like rearranging deck chairs on board the Titanic. So whilst we must be thinking about greening everything, we must also know the limitations of that. Even renewable energy requires us to use metals, requires us to have factories, requires us to make things, requires us to transport things. So it's not a kind of magic bullet, even though it's much better. Until you dedicate your life to making socially just decisions, don't fool yourself that planting 1 tree a year, composting at home, or riding a bicycle will somehow help save the environment. I don't want to be misinterpreted. We must do these things. I do them myself, even though I don't ride a bicycle, but I often walk. These sort of things are very important and necessary, and we must do them. But this alone is not going to save the world. Next. So you may say, well, then what will save the world? And actually, the only answer I've got is to look around at what people are already doing and to say there are some alternatives, but they are quite big alternatives. So I'm going to go through them quite quickly. We need to imagine and demonstrate a different world. And there are demonstrations of this already, even though they are in little pockets all over the world. I think, and like many others, that we need a world where people come together to solve the problems we face, that prioritizes the well-being of all people and the planet over profit. Next. So some of the things that exist already and for many years: eco-socialism, ecofeminism, the rights of Mother Earth. Ecofeminism links the domination of women and the degradation of the environment as consequences of patriarchy and capitalism. And so they link the two. Next. There's a nice diagram. On the one side, ego, with the man at the top, thinking that he owns and controls nature and can do whatever he wants. The one on the other side, eco, that we are part of nature, that we're not apart from it. We are just one thing within nature. Next. I think we need to really look at indigenous ways of being and knowing. There are many of these examples globally. In South Africa, we have Ubuntu, South America, Bien Viveur, India, Swaraj, and there are many others around the world. But what all of these share is a deep respect for each other and for nature. That is a commonality between all of these. Next. Food sovereignty is different to food security. I think we need to look at food sovereignty, that it is about people defining and owning their own food and agricultural systems. Localization is the very opposite of globalization. So this is really challenging the way things are and the way things work in our world today. Next. The commons, once again, the very opposite of what happens today, increasing privatization. Really what all of these things are about, what I like to call the C's, they're about the ethics of care, cooperation, and the collective. And I think that's really what we need to focus on. Next. You may have heard of this, the just transition. Some people refer to it as the deep just transition. This has been put forward by many people, including in South Africa. And I just wanted to point out that a climate job, what people are advocating for, is not the same as a green job. A climate job helps stop climate change. The jobs are publicly driven and are about creating a sustainable low carbon, or some people even want zero carbon future. But it operates within a different economic model to the current one. And the picture that I put on the left-hand side, during lockdown, it became evident to many people who didn't realize it, who exactly the essential workers are, who exactly are the most valuable workers in our society. And it definitely isn't the CEOs. Next. There are some examples of this, and so I just wanted to make reference to Rajava, which is a mostly women-led grouping in North Syria, working around eco-justice principles. There are many autonomous grassroots movements, not well supported, not well known, but they exist. And I just wanted to read the beginning bit of Vandana Shiva's quote: "If governments won't solve the climate, hunger, health, and democracy crises, then the people will." Next. And I think we owe it to our children and our grandchildren. I'm a grandmother. We have to leave them a better earth than what is predicted. I think we owe it to them. And one of those ways is to re-look at what we teach and learn. I am a person involved in education, so eco-pedagogy is very important to me. Next. I'm going to end with one of my most favorite quotes by David Orr. The plain fact is that the planet does not need more successful people, but it does desperately need more peacemakers, healers, restorers, storytellers, and lovers of every kind. It needs people who live well in their places. It needs people of moral courage willing to join the fight to make the world habitable and humane. And these qualities have little to do with success as we have defined it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Britt. What an insightful presentation indeed, and definitely it leaves us with food for thought, but that we will tackle later when we have the platform to discuss that. So thank you so much for your presentation. I hope that our viewers took down the notes and the questions needed. I would immediately like to hand over to Lizeth Smith, which is the Human Development Manager for the Cape Agulhas Municipality. And before she starts with her presentation, just a bit of background in terms of Lizeth, that she is currently still with the Cape Agulhas Municipality, and she joined them in 2009. And she obtained a diploma in general nursing, psychiatry, community and midwifery at Sarah Dolan Nursing College in 1994 and worked in the primary healthcare sector, TB, HIV, STI, and clinical research programs as well. She also obtained an honours degree in development studies at the University of the Western Cape in 2008, and this qualification opened the door to her current employment. Lizeth is passionate about community development and wished to see the community educated and developed in various fields which bring about social, environmental, and economic change. Thank you so much for your presence, Lizeth. I hand over to you.
Thank you, Deirdre. And thank you, Britt, for just setting the tone for our conversations today. We know that the changes in climate have recently become more obvious. As Britt alluded that by the end of this century, temperatures in the Earth's surface will rise by approximately 2 degrees Celsius. And this will have devastating effects on our ecosystem, flora, fauna, and also on us as human beings. Cape Agulhas area is already experiencing the effects of climate change by the change in the weather patterns, the longer dry periods between rainfall events, and the rise in sea levels. And we have a good example just close by us, and that is at Strasby a few years ago. We saw how a spring tide partially washed away the Nostra building, and at the end, the building had to be demolished due to the continuous rise in the sea levels. We are also aware that the greenhouse gas emissions in the form of carbon dioxide and methane and other gases cause significant changes in the chemical composition of the atmosphere. And this reaction has a negative effect on the air quality that we are currently breathing now. The energy production, the product consumption, and the irresponsible waste management contribute directly to climate change by adding carbon-based particles into the air during the burning process of petroleum products. This causes them then warmer air and then produce then disastrous greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And Britt also referred to these processes. So we know that waste is an inevitable byproduct of human life. It does not matter whether it is in large or small amounts, we all produce waste. The way that we manage waste, however, is the most important factor that affects climate change. Improper waste management does not only result in litter everywhere, but it also affects our environment and results in air and sea pollution. Today, we want to bring awareness on how waste contributes to climate change and how we as women can act as green ambassadors within our respective households to reduce the greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane, which are causing earth warming. In 2019, Cape Agulhas municipality produced 19,000 tons of waste. And in 2020, we produced 21,000 tons of waste. So over the 2 years, we accumulated 40,000 tons of waste. And according to our solid waste management department, more than 40% of the waste which get to the landfill is organic waste, which was not supposed to get on the landfill in the first place. So when we talk about organic waste, then we refer to the wood chips, the wood ash, tea leaves, table scraps, die oorskiet kossies wat ons so in die vullisblik gooi, fruit and vegetable scraps, eggshells, coffee grounds, paper, grass clippings, and all the other products. So many people think that throwing food scraps and paper products in a landfill is harmful because they biodegrade. However, when those compostable materials decompose, it actually lacks the air it needs to decompose quickly. Instead, it creates harmful gases which increase the carbon footprint in the atmosphere. So if we keep the organic waste away from the landfill, then our landfill will last longer, and we also help to reduce global warming. So what can we do to keep the organic waste from the landfill? I know, Britt, you said that all these attempts is a little bit, does not make a big impact on the bigger picture, but if everybody is doing their little bit, then it can reduce the carbon footprint a bit. So what can we do to keep the organic waste from the landfill? The first thing that we have to do is change our behavior in which we dispose our waste. It's not going to cost a lot of money. It is just going to cost the will to do that. So came already into the bin and the clear bag system where households have to separate the recycling waste from the others. But yet we find that our landfill is overburdened with organic waste which are not supposed to be there in the first place. It is clear that we need to educate our communities in how to reduce, reuse, and recycle material to decrease our household waste. The solid waste, the waste management department, in collaboration with our department, we are planning to introduce or implement the Youth in Waste program in September this year, where households in Bredasdorp, Struisbaai, Napier, and Arniston are going to be educated on what recycling and composting is all about. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but if we start introduce these good habits into our households in the future, it's going to help us to get rid of all the organic waste that land up unnecessary on the landfill site. And also in this program, we also going to have other environmental education and awareness programs. I know that our women can be the influencers in this project when we're going to implement it. So there are also other ways in which we can produce carbon footprint in communities, and that is to plant a tree at our homes. And a well-known tree and a proudly South African product is the spec plant, the spec boom, which we can plant inside and outside our homes to improve the air quality within our environment. So we know that spec boom acts like a carbon sponge and need the carbon to make plant tissue. Even though we are affected by climate change and global warming, I believe that women have a positive role to play in reducing the carbon footprint by keeping our organic waste away from the landfill, and also through recycling and composting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lizeth. Very insightful, and I think you guys from the municipality side do have exciting projects lined up. So thank you so much for your input as well. We will further interrogate later when we create the platform for the viewers to ask questions. I would like then to introduce to you our next speaker lined up, who is Punuswa Kakwana, and she is from Cape Nature, also known as Punu or Pumi. She was born in Sterkspruit and grew up in Aliwal North, and they are both small towns in the Eastern Cape. She moved to Cape Town to study nature conservation at CPUT and was later enrolled in as a WOL student in the Overberg region with Cape Nature. Punuswa went to work for Sandparks as an intern, as people and conservation officer, and at the Addo Elephant National Park, then as a field ranger at the Garden Route National Park, and later again as a people and conservation officer at the West Coast National Park. Last year, she rejoined Cape Nature as a stakeholder engagement officer. Welcome, Punuswa. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, hey, it's been quite a travel, but I'd like to introduce my presentation, and I'm glad I went the route I went, because I almost went the academic route. When I checked our colleagues, I believe that was very, very well covered, and the speakers thus far have done a great job. So as I've been introduced, I am Punuswa Kakwana as the Stakeholder Engagement Officer for the Overberg region, or the Overberg region in the South Landscape. And my presentation is more focused on the women in conservation, if I can say. So the impact it has on the livelihoods of women in conservation. As Cape Nature, it is one of our core mandates to try and support and also implement projects that help mitigate. It is a mammoth effort task, as our speakers have already alluded, to try and combat global warming, or climate change rather. And it is not something that's done overnight. So with the 5 minutes that I have, I would like to, I don't know if I'm having technical glitches, so my PC is slow. Just to give you guys a bit of background as to who Cape Nature is, it is a government entity that is managing 31 complexes or protected areas, which further divide into 113 reserves and wilderness areas in the Western Cape. So, similar to my previous employment, it was a national entity. This one is more based in the Western Cape, and it also does include 6 protected areas. I thought I should give you guys a bit of an orientation because I did say that I am based in the Overberg. We share, municipal areas, if I can put it in that sense. But just to break it down to you guys, the Overberg area spans over 5 district areas that stretch from the Winelands to the West Coast, Cape Karoo, and then again the Overberg and the Garden Route area. And as you guys can see, we do have six protected areas in our jurisdiction area. Within the Overberg particularly, I work in De Hoop. I'm sure many people know that area. I work in De Hoop, De Mont, and where I'm currently based, the Walker Bay complex in Hermon. Now, technology. There. So just in a summary, Cape Nature, as I had alluded earlier on, is an organization or an entity that, has got a lot of footing in projects and initiatives that do try and support, initiatives that are to mitigate climate change. And just to highlight some of the projects that I believe, are one way or the other, directly and indirectly linked to that is, community-based nature resource management and local economic development. Now, with that said, there's harvesting projects, there's wood harvesting, sour fig harvesting, and as the regulating authority with a permitting system in place, it does ensure that this is implemented in a sustainable manner. But further on, we do also encourage, a lot of youth development. Now, there are many initiatives, one of which, the recent one, is community development training that was facilitated in the George area and took some of our community members to, receive an accredited training that they can go back into the communities with the initiatives that they're already implementing and, do them in a much more structured, much more coerced way, because a lot of people came back and having had networked on that platform, it does also mean, a lot of collaboration in there. But also very close to climate change is fire management. We have got great partnerships, such as the Greater Fire Protection Agency, other conservation entities that also do their bit when it comes to managing fires, and not just combating, but also managing, because there is also an awareness part of it that I am personally involved in. And there is also, other collaborations, just like stewardship, which I will further speak about later on, where we encourage landowners, and again, the FPA does do the same, encourage landowners, to do best practice when it comes to fire management. And then again, wildlife management. Now, that is managing human and wildlife conflicts that arise. Sometimes you will find that, animals do go astray. Sometimes you will find that, awareness is required, and, just so that people understand and it doesn't lead to what is in the bottom right, on my bottom right corner, environmental crimes, but also just having, a balanced environment in our protected areas when it comes to wildlife management. And then further up is ecotourism. I hope I'm not stretching it a bit, but I thought before I delve into our topic today, I thought I should give a bit of insight as to what Cape Nature stands for, and one of which is ecotourism development. Now, when speaking of solely tourism development, the concept of ecotourism does speak to sustainable use of these resources to ensure that the nature-based recreational tourism products in our protected areas do attract international and local crowds, but also implementing this in a more sustainable and environmentally friendly manner. Now, I did, touch on stewardship earlier on, but it is, establishing those biodiversity corridors to conserve vital lowland habitats. And that is the core mandate that Cape Nature is facilitating, which does, to some degree, aid the mitigation of climate change. Now, guys, I thought, it wouldn't be Women's Day without observing this year's theme, but also looking back at where, Women's Day comes from. even though we have introduced, you know, the environmental side of things. So in 1956, we all are, or a majority of us are aware of the origin where, you know, women, you know, took the forefront of raising their voices on a system that restricted the beings of women at the mercy of men. But also this is relevant to this year's theme, or it got me thinking to this year's theme, where we are trying to realize women's rights in a equal future. And this has been a decade-long initiative and very critical in the conservation fraternity, because for the longest of time, I believe many of us are aware that it has been a male-dominated industry. And, you know, it is good to see that we as women are, you know, are on par. We are educated beings that understand what is happening around us and are able to do our bit when it comes to climate change. But we also need not forget that we are under precedenting times, or pressing times, if I can put it that way, because I just thought I should quote Nick Goldberg from the Engels Times. In fighting climate change is even harder than COVID. In this sense, with COVID, there's no $1 trillion industry with an vested interest in making sure that we believe it. So with that said, you know, when we speak climate change, it's not even though it has dated very far back, it has not been a popular topic simply because it doesn't have an industry that is lucrative to catch and keep the concentration of our general public. But also, again, he does say that, you know, we can't dismiss science or blithely, I hope I'm saying this right, ignore what we know is coming to us. Our first speaker did mention that, you know, we're out of time. We really are out of time. It is something that is coming, and we really need to work together and look out for others and accept that sacrifice will be necessary, as we have sometimes done in the war path. So not only is it a sprint or part of an Olympic of some sort in life, but we really are at war with time, because a lot is happening. Noticeable change has come about, and something really needs to be done. And now, I thought I should, trying to move on there. I thought I should, you know, have a look into our own landscape and compare the perspective of our shortest serving member in the Overberg for Cape Nature and our longest serving member, which I will, female rather, which I will get into later on. So this is my colleague, and I thought I should profile my colleague, Pakamile. She is an on-reserve conservation officer at DeWip. I think some of us have worked with our DeWip colleagues, and you might have come across her. And I asked the same questions to both my colleagues, just so that I can see, you know, their perspective on things. So these 4 questions just asked, you know, how their journey has been with Cape Nature. And Upakamila mentioned that she joined in 2018 as a nature conservator, and, you know, it has been a learning experience for her. But I also did ask her to look at her career path inside and outside her employment with Cape Nature, and how it has been and what has been her greatest highlight. And just in a summary, she did make mention that, you know, working with the monitoring of species of conservation importance, something that I think, you know, was not privy back in the day before that much. In many ways, conservation adaptation has, to her, you know, alluded that it requires adaptation and recognition of what is changing and where. Furthermore, she does say that working in projects that are targeted at assessing and the impact, of climate change to support the most effective adaptation responses possible has been another highlight. And then she also does mention that, you know, contributing to these ecosystem conservation or to the ecosystem conservation and restoration rather, in order to avoid these adverse impacts to the environment and the beneficial services that humans derive from such, has also been a bit of a highlight to her. But also, like I said, I have had a strong focus on this year's theme, and again, on the origin of where we come from with Women's Day. I did ask her, and given the fact that conservation is a male-dominated industry, what her future prospects are. And in a nutshell, she mentioned that, you know, mentoring and creating a safe space or supporting female conservationists is what she aspires towards. And then lastly, given the pandemic, because as I said, this year's theme, the origin of Women's Day, but also not forgetting the kinds of conditions that we are working under. What has been the negative and positive impacts that she has seen in her line of work. And I think, you know, a lot of us can relate that, you know, the health, the economic, the social difficulties that COVID-19 has brought about has had a bit of a ripple effect when it comes to budget cuts, and has resulted, you know, in challenges of implementing these initiatives that we talk of, some of which are the poverty alleviation projects that we all are familiar with, EPWP, or just to be more specific, NRM, those harvesting projects that I was talking about, and also social development, something that we work very much in. But again, allow me to introduce my other longest serving member rather, and that is Vicky Hudson. So she is the Landscape Conservation Intelligence Manager, and she has been with us for, she said to me as like just over a decade, 2 decades rather, sorry. And she started as a conservation with the Blue Crane project, and then joined, you know, permanently as an off-reserve officer. A bit of a similarity with the youngest serving colleague. But also, as you guys can see, you'll see a bit more detail when it comes to Vicky, because there we can clearly see the experience. But I did ask her of her highlight, and she mentioned that, you know, working or helping communities in conservation and conserve the species that they share the same environment with. You know, they're a bit of a similarity that I noticed, but also to facilitate the adoption to overcome change and challenging circumstances that climate change brings about. Now, she, in her words, and I'd like to read this verbatim, she says that she has been very fortunate to work immediately with a range of species of high conservation value that many people will never see in their lifetime. She values the privilege and in turn has met and been inspired by people who have changed her life in so many ways, and more than she can have imagined. And she's also very grateful and humbled by this. Further on, again, very same questions that I asked, looking at this year's theme in conservation and it being a male-dominated industry, I did ask her of her future prospects, career prospects. She says that she wants to motivate and support and pass on lessons learned to the up-and-coming generation of female conservationists. Again, you know, I think a common interest that I can also relate to. And she has also seen firsthand how gender equality has enriched and enhanced the way we do conservation, which has led to, you know, exponentially positive effect. And then lastly, I did also ask her about both the negative and the positive impact in her line of work. And she says that, you know, at the rate in which COVID-19 has brought about, you know, both positive and negative change, it has been very outstanding. The mere desperation brought on by COVID has had, you know, another economic and human lives alarmed, and often outweighed our ability to be receptive and engage with conservation efforts in the landscape. And this has also again resulted in budget constraints with a knock-on effect of challenging working conditions. And I think everybody can relate to. And then she does, you know, highlight, you know, the good of this circumstance that we all find ourselves in. Our willingness to adapt, you know, rapid learning skills. We are here hosting a webinar and reaching far more greater audience. And, you know, to the new level and to make it work. Somehow we make it work, and with a positive turnaround that deserves credit. She also does say, you know, humanity adapting to this new normal has been tough. And is a renewed sense of fragility in our lives. Obviously, change is not something that we all are good with. And in a recent article, she did cite an article which I have also gotten a few reference pieces from. The COVID climate is described as a dress rehearsal for a global climate change. And she further says that she can definitely relate to this in her line of work, and has a take-home message that if we don't act to avert crisis sooner, rather than later, the problem will only get worse. And this is very true for climate change and conservation in general. So I believe so far with the speakers, the first two speakers that have spoken, we all are clear that we really have got no time, and we are seeing these visible and noticeable effects of climate change, and we really need to work with each other. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonuswa. Very insightful and also very profound messages from your side. And we have to thank you for also profiling your female colleagues and their thoughts around climate change, which is very important at this stage. We're also very mindful of time at this stage. And therefore, I would directly want to move to our next speaker on the program, which is Stacey Lee Dennis. And just to give a bit of background in terms of her qualifications, she's currently got a BA Honours in Psychology, studied at the UWC, Masters in Philosophy, Land and Agrarian Studies, also at UWC, Advanced Management Development Certificate at US. And then currently she's in the process of completing a PhD in Land and Agrarian Studies at the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies based at the University of the Western Cape. She's currently self-employed doing social science research and within the small-scale fishing community, and then also busy with community development facilitation. She's experienced in community development, training of youth and women in informal settlements, farm workers, fishing communities, and rural development capacity building, as well as training and team building, qualitative research, and project management. And she's also part of the Overberg Development Association. And then she resonates with seeing herself as the daughter of the ocean, mother of many, and a people's person. Over to you, Tracy. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Wow. All respect to the previous panelists. I'm very proud to be sharing a panel with you. You've all done groundbreaking work in your particular fields, and as I think, as women, we should salute you, and all women, and happy Women's Month to everybody. So I've been asked to talk about a particular case study that we've been working on, a project that we've been doing with coastal women in the Cape Agulhas area, and that also extended into the West Coast. So I won't take up too much of your time, I hope not. And I'm trying to be, as quick as possible. So if you can go to my first slide, please. The next slide. The admin, please.
Must I go to the next slide?
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, it's that one. So if we're looking at, so I've been participating in coastal communities for about 15 years now. And when we look at coastal communities, we see that fishing communities are becoming increasingly poor and more vulnerable. And to think that this all started when fishing communities were incorporated into formal rights allocation in 1998, when they had to start applying for abalone, lobster, lionfish rights. And this system inadvertently proved to have a negative effect on livelihoods. And also especially on women, because women's economic dependence and vulnerability became more open to exploitation. Found that the of women in fishing was diminishing, where in previous years women could part and parcel of processing and packaging and doing all kinds of other fish things with fish within the. We found that now with the cold chain system and the greater demands, that fish are being taken directly out of communities, and that women are playing less and less of a role in fishing. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So in the light of climate change, we had to start thinking of what kind of adaptation strategies we could have for fishing communities, and especially women in communities and fishing communities. And this was preempted by a workshop, or a climate change adaptation workshop at UCT in 1918, where the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the Benguela Current Commission held a regional training workshop on climate change adaptation planning. And the aim was to support moving from vulnerability assessments to adaptation planning and implementation in fisheries and aquaculture. Amongst the key areas of interest that was identified by South African participants was the use of marine resources such as kelp, seaweed, and for the production of products such as cosmetics, soaps, and food, and so on. And this was to promote social economic development, to look at poverty and food security. And from that workshop, PLAS received grant funding to support such a project, and we started with a project. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so from there, PLAS began with a climate change adaptation project for women. It built on the work already undertaken by the FAO and the Benguela Current Commission relating to ecological vulnerability assessments and enhancing climate change resilience. Specifically, and the project will specifically conduct skills training workshops for vulnerable coastal communities, particularly women, on the use of alternative marine resources that would enable them to adapt to the negative changes in fish resources and availability as a result of climate change. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please.
I am on the next slide, Tracy.
I'm not on the next slide yet. Okay. So the expected benefits of this project included strengthened resilience, climate change for coastal communities, and improved climate change plans, including national adaptation plans and nationally determined social contributions and so on. So we looked at the Joburg area with a specific approach to localization of experts, sustainable use of resources. We looked at the making of jewelry, soaps, candles from kelp and shells, and the focus was also to still on the previous slide, thanks. The focus go low energy consumption, low water use, low cost, and as environmentally aware as possible. As you can see on the picture, yeah, that's a lot of it's kelp that's dyed and cut and so on. And during this training, we also aimed that women be provided with a take-home startup kit, because often we see that women attend workshops and things and they go home with nothing. So that they it was also planned that they take something home with them. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the methodology we used was action research. Our selection criteria was women in particular, Also, we had a specific criteria for facilitators. We looked at the localization of the training as local as possible, and then also supporting of local women where we had the training, other women in the area to prepare and supply food to the workshops. We used a local organizer, which happened to be me, and then also women in coastal communities co-designed the training program with the women facilitators. So as we were going through the project, I also assisted in planning the next ones and so on. And also to address the gendered nature of fishing communities. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so who were part of this course? Yeah, so the project started as a pilot in December 2019 with groups of women from the Overberg coastal villages of Struisbaai, Arniston, Buffeljagsbaai, and Pearly Beach. They varied in age, the youngest being 20 and the oldest being 67. And the aim was that in the light of global change, global climate change, diminishing coastal resources and growing unemployment, to equip women with skills, with a skill set to enable them to create alternative income opportunities within their households and communities. The pilot took the shape of a one-week course consisting of workshop sessions on jewelry, soap and candle making, from resources that is found in the natural coastal environment, like shells, kelp plants, net, old nets. And they also had a photography session there, how to photograph the products, social media, marketing, and also costing and display and so on. And then, as I said previously, we used women facilitators, and we supported local women entrepreneurs in the area by also, you know, us dining with them, asking them to make food for us and so on. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so why is this important? Okay, so just before that, we also did a follow-up then. So due to the COVID pandemic and the lockdown regulations, the next phase of the program could only be implemented in November 2020. And this took part in two parts. One was a follow-up course that we did on the making of, they also learned how to make their own sanitizer, how to make lotions. And then at the same time, we also started a similar program with women, and they, by default, there were 3 men in the group, which, by the way, changed the dynamic of the group completely. So we also started a similar project with women on the West Coast. So the two programs were running concurrently, where the first group of the Overberg had a follow-up, and the group on the West Coast had a beginners and also into the follow-up training. And the follow-up training we did at the Grail Center in Kleinmond, and we also had a workshop called From Self-Doubt to Self-Sustainability, where we found that we cannot talk about entrepreneurship and global change and things, and we can't talk about entrepreneurship and all of these things without talking about women's struggles, their relationship, their confidence challenges, and everything that is keeping them back. Okay. You can continue. So there we were at the Grail Center. As I said, we had sessions there on the follow-up sessions. We also had the sessions on self-doubt and self-sustainability. And then we had a guest facilitator from the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform, gave the group some information about the development of co-ops and the different kinds of cooperatives and how they could be working together. Next step, next slide, please, sorry. Okay, so what were the challenges for these women going forward? And as you can see in that slide, that is one of the pieces that was made by the women. You can see there's a pair of earrings there and a necklace and so on. So these were some of the things that they've learned how to do. Yeah, so what were the challenges? I think the first one, the COVID-19 virus had a tremendous effect on women and in coastal communities, and it set everybody back, but I think it set women back the most. Communities, there's no markets.
Hi, Tracy, are you still there?
It seems as if we lost Tracy there. Connectivity issues.
Deirdre, we usually have these challenges, especially with strays by. I think there's an electricity problem. I think maybe we can continue to the next presenter, and maybe Tracy can just wrap. I see she only got 2 more slides left. Maybe we can then just pose a question to her afterwards. I will also be sharing the presentations with everyone in the meeting, Deirdre.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Renier. So they noted that we will then continue with our discussions. And any other questions, I think Tracy, in any case, captured the essence of what they are busy doing in terms of projects to develop and uplift our local communities, especially young women. And she also elaborated in terms of challenges and things that they've been facing at this stage. So then without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Faith Chiumbiri. And she is currently a sustainability professional with over 10 years of experience working with and for local governments. Her work focuses on supporting local governments to develop strategies and action plans toward building resilience to climate change, and also looking at means to promote inclusive and sustainable ways of managing resources. As an environmental officer at the Western Cape government, Faith has been involved in the development of several strategic programs, which includes the development of the flagship ecological infrastructure investment framework and the revision of the provincial climate change response strategy. Faith holds a master's in philosophy and environmental management from the Stellenbosch University. So over to you, Faith. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to hear about your presentation.
Thank you very much, Deirdre, and yeah, for inviting me. And good morning to everyone who's in the session, who's attending the session. But I see that Tracy Lee is still going on.
No, she is not. What we're going to do is we consolidated that discussion, and if there are any questions and anything that she wishes to add, we can do that after we concluded all the presentations.
Okay, sure. I would like to share my presentation, but I don't have the permission yet.
Renier, would someone be able to assist with that?
Just try to share your screen quickly. You were on the screen now, Faith. Just try it again. Don't stop. Can you just try that again?
Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Well, the presenter's view.
Yes.
Cape Agala's Municipality Climate Change Webinar. The Gender Gap Analysis and the Western Cape Climate Change Response Strategy. Sure. So yeah, thank you once again. Apologies about that. And thank you once again for the invitation to be part of the webinar, and for also organizing something that's actually reaching out to a number of stakeholders at a time where like movement is quite restricted. But again, you can keep sharing information with everyone else. And in my presentation, I would like to actually share two pieces of work that I thought would be relevant for such a platform. The first one is the work that we undertook, which is the gender gap analysis. And the second one is an update on the current draft of what is called the Western Cape Climate Change Response Strategy. And for me, it's also quite heartwarming. It gives me this warm, fuzzy feeling to be part of the panel of women who are actually a leading voice in issues of climate change, of promoting transformation. And as Punyuswa mentioned, quite in line with the theme for this year's Women's Month, Generation Equality, realizing women's rights for an equal future, something that started back in 2013. And although it was about struggles and freedom, the struggle still continues, where women are the leading voice to say, how do we emancipate ourselves from the climate issues, from the climate challenges that we're facing? So yeah, that's the outline of my presentation, as I mentioned. And yeah, we started with the science about climate change, which was presented, and also output from the AR6 report. And we're saying that from the climate projections, they confidently show that temperatures will continue to rise. And that under the middle of the road emission scenario, where good global mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions takes place, we're still going to expect increases of temperatures of about 1.5 degrees Celsius by end of the century, on top of the 1.5 degrees Celsius that we've already started experiencing since 1918. But we also need to be mindful and to ensure that and acknowledge that there will be differential impacts that will be felt across the regions. And for example, the average temperature may rise by up to 6 degrees Celsius, that's in the interior. And this will accelerate migration to coastal areas, Cape Agalas being one. And again, they also have their own devils that they're fighting, issues of sea level rise, and it's projected that it will rise by at least 60 centimeters by 2100. So it is important to understand that even if we've got the climate change, we also have the issues that women or that society deals with on a day-to-day basis, the socio-economic and environmental issues that we've always been dealing with. And so it's important for us to understand the confluence between the gender biases that come with it, challenges, injustice, that also shapes parts of the narrative. And it's also important to know that climate change is a cross-cutting issue, and it goes beyond the geographic and political boundaries. And that calls for strong leadership, because failure to adopt an integrated and systemic approach will result in debilitating consequences to compromise on safety, the economy, social norms, service delivery, you name it. Another important thing that we also need to acknowledge as we go on this discourse is that men and women experience climate change very differently. And as such, our responses need to be sensitive to these differences. And this is something that I'll get into in my presentation. And there is need to promote a whole of society approach. So making climate change everyone's business, so that we're implementing gender smart and gender responsive solutions. And this could be influenced or grounded or supported by policies, action plans, and strategies. That's where we come in as the different levels or spheres of government, so that we reduce the gender stereotypes and encourage women to actively participate in decision making. And thus removing the implicit and explicit barriers to gender equality. The issues of gender it's actually a human rights issue, and as the Western Cape government, we have what is called a human rights policy framework. And this is something that gives effect to the government's level of government's commitments to ensure that human rights barriers are removed. So as a department within the Western Cape government, we have got the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. We have what is termed the Gender Equality Strategic Framework. And again, this is our policy commitment to saying we are going to be championing issues of gender into our functions, our mandates, and how we engage society in the province. And in 2018, the department reviewed 3 of its policies. So that was the first step. Reviewed 3 of our policies to determine the degree to which gender was mainstreamed. And one of these was the Western Cape Climate Change Response Strategy. Surprise, surprise, the results indicated that all the policies were gender blind. So some are putting a blanket a term or blanket, just applying a blanket lens on both men and women, despite the differentiated impacts that the different genders or the different sexes actually experience. So in a way to try and redress that, the Climate Change Directorate undertook a gender gap analysis for the Climate Change Response Strategy in 2020. And by the way, the Western Cape Climate Change Response Strategy is the policy document that was actually endorsed by Cabinet in 2014 to give direction on how we're responding to climate change within the province. So working with the different departments and also in our support for local government. And a gender gap analysis, according to the Department of Public Services and Administration, DPSA, is to identify the differences between men and women to aspects as their specific roles, activities, conditions, needs, priorities, resources, and developmental issues. These aspects can then inform the impact of existing policies, programs, and projects on gender inequalities and how gender inequitable power relations need to be balanced or addressed between men and women so that we can strive towards a more sustainable and inclusive future. So in our gender gap analysis, we made use of secondary sources available online. And we also consulted with the United Nations guidelines, the different decisions that have been made, including the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, which has got distinct goals on climate change and women, issues such as the Paris Agreement and what they say about gender, the role of women in advancing the climate agenda. We also looked at government policy documents and position papers, peer-reviewed and journal articles, as well as just anecdotal information that we could come across. So the sectors that we covered were those that had been identified in the 2014 iteration of the Climate Change Response Strategy. So these were water, biodiversity, ecosystem goods and services, coastal management, air quality, energy, waste management, transport, human settlements, economic development. And I'll delve into some key findings of the sector on biodiversity, ecosystem goods and services, but also more specifically looking at the biomass sort of value chain. And by biomass here, I tried to group most of the issues together because there were quite a lot of similarities. So if you're talking about clearing of alien species, vegetation, if you're talking about harvesting of flowers, or wildflowers, if you're talking about harvesting of tea, rooibos, or nuts or other wild fruit, etc. So I put all that together. So please bear with me if there will be some discrepancies for some of them. So overall, the analysis found that women's work often takes place in the least valued parts of the value chain. So they tend to be underpaid and also have their jobs as less secure. Women are often not visible despite them being pivotal and doing large parts of the activities along this value chain. And by the value chain, we're talking from the beginning where we're looking at the input, the provision and use, looking at a production, what happens up until we reach a harvesting time, post-harvesting, processing and storage, as well as the transportation, marketing and sales. So again, the gender gaps, it's quite informal, women not acknowledged well enough despite the role that they play, and usually under-resourced. And then they're also quite underrepresented in some of the stages. And some of the key issues that I would like to share with the other participants include the issue of land ownership. When we're actually starting the chain itself, land is seldom owned by women who are living on it. And this is quite something that's common, especially in the rural areas. So land ownership, as we know, gives tenure and security, as well as access to surety. If you'd like to get a loan or to get financial aid. So women have got very limited access to resources. I mentioned about the financial resources. They've got limited access to technology and skills development initiatives that are happening. And when it comes to the production phase, and including harvesting and the post-harvesting, processing, packaging, and distribution, women face some challenges that are already inherent in our system. The first is time allocation. You realize that most women have to, on a normal day, have to wake up, do the house chores, which are usually unpaid chores, unpaid work that they have to do. They have to see to the family, the children, are they ready for school, helping them, preparing breakfast, doing some household chores, and then only get ready to be at work, say from 8 o'clock. And they will work the normal time from 8 usually to 4:30 or 8 to 5. And during that time, that's the time when the normal rates are apply. After that, they have to knock off, so that again, they have to go back home, do the unpaid chores or unappreciated, unrecognized chores, getting the children from school, having to clean the children, preparing supper, and going to sleep, making sure, going to sleep and getting ready for the following day. And therein the inequality kicks in. Sometimes along the value chain, extra shifts or working longer hours means you get paid more. So men are available to volunteer to work after 5 o'clock for the longer shifts. Men are available to work before 8 o'clock, the earlier shifts, and they actually maximize in terms financially in terms of that. The other thing as well, time allocation. Women are also, during weekends, women usually commit their time to fixing the family, dealing with the household chores. Men, again, are available to volunteer and work during the weekends, and they get extra money. And so they're always financially much ahead of women in these things. So it's actually not just climate change, it's climate change interlinking with our day-to-day experiences that already disproportionately puts women at a back footing. So the other thing as well, when it comes to transportation, market access, and marketing, we realize that when women, say informal women or women who are not going to work, when they're collecting the fruit or they're collecting the flowers locally, they do so at a small scale, and they sell at the local grocery, at the local shop for not nearly as much. But when men get into that similar environment, they organize themselves, get registered, and form a small to medium sized enterprise, and they actually tap onto the mainstream market, so feeding into the mainstream economy. Again, that already also furthers the inequity or the inequality that exists between men and women. So there are some gaps in in the transportation, the market and sales, which often results in fragmented and inefficiencies being experienced. So looking at all these, the normal scenarios, the normal day-to-day living, biodiversity losses and other extreme events that will be brought about due to climate change. We've heard of more frequent and prolonged droughts. We've heard of floods, heat waves, and health pandemics, as earlier on alluded to, will further entrench inequality and have women remain at the bottom of the income distribution with limited capacity to competitively access the market within that the biomass value chain sector. So these gender gaps, as highlighted in the value chain, remain a persistent barrier to growth, profitability, and sustainability, not only for women, but for the whole sector that we're talking about in general. So looking at the whole biodiversity ecosystem and goods, is ecosystem goods and services sector. And from our gender gap analysis as well, another key issue, another key challenge that we identified is that across a number of the sectors, the data that is available is not necessarily disaggregated according to gender. So this makes it very difficult to analyze the differentiated impacts that our current way of life, let alone climate change, is having or will have on either men or women within the province. So we did something similar for all the sectors that I've listed to the left. So having gone through the process, we then said, we're not just going to end it at challenges, at problems only. We would like to also engage the sector experts, because they are the ones who actually know what's happening within the sectors and are much in touch or much on the ground to inform how we ensure that we adequately address the gaps that exist. So we're saying, going forward, as we're also revising our Western Cape climate change response strategy, how do we work to ensure that we formulate gender-aware sector policies and action plans so that we address those key issues that directly impact and affect women? And this is something that we would like to actually take on board with Cape Nature and the Directorate Biodiversity and Coastal Management, because we actually want to inform as well the sector-specific policies to also start taking up that gender lens, applying that gender lens in how we give policy direction within the province. How do we establish gender-sensitive benchmarks so that we can monitor and have indicators and monitor those indicators, so that we feed information, we feed data from the grassroots level up to national reporting platforms, and in this way also ensure that there is horizontal integration in how we talk about gender at the different levels, but also vertical alignment with what is happening at the provincial level and as well as national level.
Faith, I'm just going to have to ask you, apologies, to just begin to wrap it up. We are almost close to our time for wrapping up, and we have another speaker lined up. And we still need to just make provision for people to get through to their questions. So just be mindful of that, please. Thank you.
Sure. Let me wrap up then. And as well as looking at the specific programs that we can actually put in place to empower women so that we get their voices heard in the dialogue. So I think let me conclude at that point for the gender gap analysis and move on to the climate change response strategy, which I said the climate change has got a climate change response strategy. The Western Cape has a climate change response strategy, which was endorsed by Cabinet, and it's currently being updated to respond to the urgency for an accelerated global climate change and the dramatic global events of 2020. We envisage that this is a transversal strategy that will provide policy direction in response to climate-related risks and potential opportunities. So going forward, currently, yes, the strategy speaks to the response to the urgency of the global climate change response. As mentioned earlier, we've got 8.5 years. I think we're in the last 8.5 years to stop the irreversible damage from climate change and avert the climate catastrophe. And we're getting young people also coming to the fore, demanding that today's leaders can act on their behalf for future generations. And if there's anything that you can take away from this response strategy, is talking to the urgency, the ambition, and need for collaborative efforts. So we've also put in place critical timelines to say what needs to be in place currently in 5 years and up until 2030, so that we are on time or on track to actually meeting our 2050 target. And we also saying we need to mainstream and identify opportunities to incorporate responsiveness to gender disparities in our climate change response strategy. Currently, the vision that we have is that the Western Cape contributes to a prosperous, equitable, and inclusive South African society, anchored on 3 objectives. 1, that's looking at accelerated investment into the green economy and energy transition. The second one is that we invest into natural capital and reduce our climate risks, and hence ensure that we promote human health, jobs, and well-being. And the third objective is that we promote climate governance, the government departments leading from the front. We also look at finance mechanisms to ensure that our climate change agenda is well financed, and then we put programs in place to promote that or to support that. We have identified terms that we are calling the problem statements, and those are 6 that are guiding how we are approaching development of our climate change response strategy. And yeah, you can see those as they are lined up on the screen. We're also looking at critical priority actions, which we are saying if we miss those, then we miss the bus to actually take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. And one thing that I'd like to point out is to create a People's Climate Assembly. And in this, we would like to actually work hand in hand with civil society, the different people, faith-based organizations, local grassroots communities, to hold government accountable and help us keeping track to our commitments that would have been made. Also looking at issues of looking at technology and behavior shifts, promoting renewable energy, looking at sector responses, as well as how we can leverage on existing sector plans and strategies going forward. Like I mentioned, it's got that gendered aspect to it. So from our outputs from our gender gap analysis will also feed in to try and see how do we actually address in a systemic way issues that will make sure that our strategy is quite responsive to the differentiated gender needs. And in terms of, this is my last slide, in terms of the stakeholder engagement process, we would like the Western Cape to converge for climate action. And we would like this to be a strategy for the Western Cape by the Western Cape residents themselves, so that there is ownership. Hence, we starting from government departments, looking at political leaders. We would like to engage the research and academia, municipal officials, communities at grassroots level, the private sector, youth, because we're looking at Vision 2050. Most of us would have reached retirement by then. So how do we ensure that we capture that voice of youth so that it's something that's responsive to their needs? And looking at traditional leaders. And in terms of timelines, we've currently had sessions with government stakeholders, and our next engagement is looking at focus group engagements. And I would like, this is actually more of a challenge, to say to the women who are participating on this webinar, to participate in that stakeholder engagement process. And not only women, but youth as well, so that we get our voices, our concerns captured in that response strategy going forward. And it will be ready for public review again in October this year. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of my presentation. And yeah, happy to share the draft climate change response strategy and the gender gap analysis, should any of the people be interested to find out more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faith, so much appreciated. As I indicated that we are running out of time, but we also do not want to do an injustice to our last speaker, but not the least, which is Vanessa Barnes-Jones. She joined the Western Cape Department of Agriculture's Young Professionals Program in 2012 after completing her undergraduate degree in agricultural economics at the University of Stellenbosch. She graduated at the end of 2012 with an honors degree in agricultural economics, and then soon thereafter completed a master's degree in the same field at the University of Stellenbosch in March 2016. Her master thesis was titled Developing a Suitable Carbon Calculator for Smallholder Mixed Farming Systems in the Western Cape, South Africa. Vanessa was permanently employed by the department after completing a master's degree and is working for the Agricultural Economic Services Program under the division Macro and Resource Economics since 2016. She is very passionate about agriculture, especially its youth and the environment. And Vanessa served on various professional organizations. In 2012, she was chosen to participate in the PMA PEC Family Career Pathways Program in Atlanta, USA, representing the Stellenbosch University, the Faculty of Agri-Science. And in 2014, Vanessa was selected for the Agricultural Professional Fellowship Program as a fellow, where she attended various workshops and conferences which were hosted in South Africa and the USA. She has published articles in the AgriProbe and the Professional Agricultural Workers Journal, and has also co-written a paper and a poster for the Agricultural Economics Association of South Africa and the World Congress of Environmental and Resource Economists. She also presented papers and posters at Africa Farm Management Association, Professional Agricultural Workers Conference, and the annual FSD Extension Symposium and the Southern African Energy Efficiency Confederation 2020 Conference about her work on carbon footprinting and carbon tax. At the last mentioned conference, Vanessa was one of the 3 finalists for the Female Energy Professional of the Year Awards. Vanessa also served as the secretary for the department's Green Committee, and she was also part of the various forums, stakeholder engagements regarding climate change strategies and policies for the Western Cape province. Vanessa plans to pursue a PhD in the field of resource economics and behavioral sciences. Over to you, Vanessa.
Good morning, Chair, fellow panelists, and all the viewers. We were asked to talk about the effects of climate change on the livelihood of women, but my presentation today will focus on agriculture and what projects and tools has the Western Cape Department of Agriculture put in place to fight the climate change that we are currently facing. Next slide, please.
Sorry. Can you see the screen?
I can see the screen, but it's not in presenter mode or, yeah, presentation mode.
Okay. Sorry, Vanessa, just having some technical.
No, it's fine.
It's coming.
Okay. Next slide. Okay, so today my presentation is going to look at climate policy, climate smart projects, climate smart tools, climate smart partner, and then I'm going to go into agriculture in the Overberg, how does it look, and climate change, how it's affecting the Overberg, and then I'm going to give concluding remarks. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so climate policy. Every time we develop, we create, we plan projects or tools, or even looking at research, we use policy to guide us to ask relevant questions like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? For who are we doing it? And who's going to benefit from this project? The department has various projects and research underway to address the effects of climate change on the agricultural sector as well. And table 1 is just highlighting all the policies I normally look at when I do a project or a research that's focusing on climate change. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I've highlighted a few of our climate smart projects. I'm not going to go in detail due to time, so I'm just going to highlight and then I'll just speak about the ones that I am involved with. So we've got Conservation Agriculture Western Cape. The second one is the Smart Agri Plan that was developed in 2016, and they're currently busy updating this one. And then the third one is the Carbon Footprinting Project, where I am closely involved. That is one of my babies. So I normally, every year, I measure our 7 research farms. They spread across the Western Cape. I measure their carbon footprint. I look at, are we on path? Are we worse off? Are we better off? What are the hotspots? And the things that we have put in place, is it working? Is it not working? What can we change? And then also I was, the ostrich industry approached me in 2019, and then they asked if I can't assist in helping developing the carbon footprint for the ostrich industry, because there was nothing in literature. So last year we released the ostrich carbon footprint for the industry. So now they can use that as a benchmark for individuals' farms or for the industry, and they can update it like every year. And then also we try to stay on top of carbon tax so that we can inform our farmers what is happening in that space. And when carbon tax hits the agricultural sector directly, they're already geared and they know what to do and they have things in place. And then I also developed a smallholder mixed farming carbon calculator for our smallholder farmers, because we know it's just not one commodity or one activity happening on these farms. It's a little bit of everything. So not all the eggs are in one basket. You can go to the next slide, please. And then we had a recycling project where I was also involved with, but unfortunately it was discontinued due to operational changes. But there is still some of the 7 research farms that's still doing recycling. And a colleague, an ex-colleague of mine, Leandre Beets and myself, we developed a recycling manual for our research farms on how to implement a recycling system on the farms. We gave training, we had various workshops with him. Yeah, and then one of my current projects that I'm working on, and I'm very excited about this one, I call it the City of Cape Town project. So the study is in response to a new, not finalized target that the Milan Urban Food Pack Agreement was set for all its city members. The target under discussion is the 50% reduction in food-related carbon emissions by 2030. And the city is not currently aware of what is the food emissions. So that led to the need for this study. So also the study will highlight the importance of urban agriculture towards food sustainability, fighting hunger and lowering food emissions. This project's got 2 outflows. So the one is a carbon footprint study, but looking at urban farming systems versus rural farming systems, seeing which system is low in emissions. And then the second one is measuring carbon footprint of average food baskets in South Africa. So it's a case study of City of Cape Town. Here we look at the different household incomes, what is in their average food basket, where does the food come from, and then based on that we work out the carbon footprint of these average food baskets for the different household income groups. And then there's also various other projects that the department is busy with. You can go to the next slide, please. I'm sorry. And then looking at the smart tools, I'm not going to go in detail, but we have the Cape Town Mapper, we've got Fruit Loop, we've got the Drought Portal, we've got the Green Agri Portal. Okay, I must advocate this one. if you go on this website, you will find plans and policies relating to climate change, carbon tax, energy, water, and etc. They will give you links to the online tools that's accredited. They will give you useful tips on how to be sustainable. They will give you the current and latest research. They will also give you links to websites where to find green funding and agri funding and etc. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, and then there's also another carbon footprint calculator. We're also in partnership with them or working closely with them. They're called Blue North. The name of the website or the calculator is Confronting Climate Change, but they're only focusing on the fruit and wine sector, but they're busy expanding to grains and vegetables. And then there's also the Agri Outlook, enterprise budgets, and marketing and agribusiness tool that farmers can use. You can go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Vanessa, can you see the slides? I see the slides on my side.
It's frozen by the Climate Smart tools, though.
Is it still on Smart Tools?
Yes.
Okay, but it's moving on my side. You want me just to stop sharing it and then share it again? Just to see maybe.
Okay, yes, please. But I'll just keep on talking so long.
Okay.
Yeah. So then our Climate Smart partner, we work closely with GreenCap. We've got various others, but I highlighted GreenCap because I am also working with them closely and I know what they do. So they are a non-profit organization. They help unlock investment and employment potential of green technologies and services and to support the transition to a resilient green economy. The focus areas are waste, water, renewable energy, energy efficiency, industrial symbiosis, sustainable agriculture, gas, green finance, the bioeconomy, and they also have an agricultural sector desk where I work closely with. Renier.
Hi, are you still not seeing the slides?
Still not seeing the slide. And the next one is just where I zoom in on the Overberg and Cape Agulhas. So I just need those figures.
Huh? Can you see? Vanessa,
yes.
He says you can see the slide, so it's only on your side.
Oh, okay. So the other people can see it. So if the other people can see it, then that's fine. I'll just work from my papers. So we on the economic sector breakdown slide. Yes. The next one, please. Yes. Okay. So looking at the Overberg and looking at the gross value added from the various industries to the economy, we can see for 2020, like if we just look at the Overberg, we can see that agriculture is contributing 10% and agri-processing 6%. When we switch or when we zoom in into the Cape Agulhas area, we see that they contributing 7% to that 10% of the Overberg, and agri-processing is 6% of the 6% of the Overberg. I don't know if I'm making sense. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at the sector employment statistics, we can see that just looking at the Overberg, we can see that the agricultural formal sector is employing the most people, followed by trade and hospitality, followed by businesses, then social services, and then government. Looking at Cape Agulhas, the picture slightly looks very different. We will see that trade and hospitality is taking the lead, followed by businesses, then social services, then government, and then only the agricultural sector. And I also just want to highlight that agri-processing is present in the Overberg and in the Cape Agulhas area, but it's not that huge. Next slide, please. Okay, and coming to the agricultural crop and yield, I use the Western Cape Department's flyover data. So what the flyover data is, it's literally a census of what is happening on the land. So the latest data that I have is the 2013 and 2017 data. The 2020 data is supposed to be released somewhere this year. I can't unfortunately give you a date. But looking at the hectares, we can see that there was a slightly decrease for Cape Agulhas and Swellendam area, and then Overstrand stayed stable, and then a slight increase in Theewaterskloof. And then looking at the tonnage or the yields produced, unfortunately the picture looks sad. We can see that there was a decrease in the yields, and this can be due to various reasons. So we have to go look what happened between 2013 and 2017, and we'll see there was drought, so hotter temperatures, maybe there was pests. So it can be various things that affected the yields. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this year I released a Rooibos report for the Overberg. So in this report, I just compared how the Overberg is performing compared to the Cederberg region where Rooibos tea is coming from. We could see that the Overberg is actually performing much better in terms of yields than the Cederberg region. So that's why they're also reaching out to our area to ask if more farmers are not willing to plant Rooibos tea. So when I went to go look at the flyover data, in 2017, I saw that there was only 58 hectares under Rooibos production. But when we interviewed the farmers, we saw there was 682 hectares under Rooibos production. So we also went back to go see what did this Rooibos plants, what other crops did it replace. And in the table, you can see the other crops that it replaced. So farming activities also changed a lot. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then we, as a department, are closely involved in clearing alien plants. So in the Overberg, there's also an alien clearing project running. So just looking at the figures, when we look at 2020-21 for Overberg, we can see that they cleared around about 1,300 hectares, and zooming in on Cape Agulhas, they cleared about 900 hectares. So they played a major role in the Overberg's total hectares cleared. And looking at the 2021-22 stats, but the data is just up till July, 579 hectares were cleared for the Overberg and 248 for the Cape Agulhas area. And in jobs created, we can see that 2020-21, there was 210 green jobs for the Overberg, where 59 was in Cape Agulhas, and in the 2021-22 stats shows that 213 jobs were created and 65 of the jobs were in the in Cape Agulhas. And then looking at the female-male ratio, we can see more females were employed. And then I also have to just say that 2 of our team leaders or supervisors, they are women. So yeah, next slide, please. Okay, coming to the floods that we experienced recently, I went to go look at the disaster relief data. So for Overberg, 75 farmers applied for disaster relief. 19 of those farmers were from the Cape Agulhas area, 3 from Overstrand, 24 from Swellendam, and 29 from Theewaterskloof. They experienced production losses and damages to their infrastructure. Next slide, please. You can just click. Then you just click like 3 times. Okay, thank you. So looking at the drought support for the Western Cape, but I'm just zooming in on the Overberg. You'll see there's Gansbaai, Swellendam, and Berrydale, and you'll see each one's got the green triangle. So what the green triangle means is that they recovered from drought, so the velds are better and they can actually give food to the animals. So they have been taken off the drought support list. But if I now go back, this is 2021 data. If I go back, then you will see that they were red and then orange. So the red is like the worst off. They can't feed the animals, so that's why they applied the drought support. And then when they go orange, it just shows that the felts are improving, but they're not there yet. And then when they're green, they're sustainable and they can go off the program. But I must also just note that very rare, although they're green, there's still 13 farmers on the drought support system. That is due to the 13 farmers are close to the Livelihoods border, so they're not closer to Suriname. So they, as you can say, their climate looks different than, or they experience a different type of climate than the rest of the other farmers in the Veridale area. Next slide, please. And then just to conclude, awareness about climate change and the impact on the various sectors are so needed. Mitigation and adaptation strategies needed to be implemented, and we should not just talk about it. We must act now, and discussions and implement ways to decrease individuals or business impact on the environment. And I listed various things that they can look at, like recycling and upcycling, renewable energy, like switching to solar or wind or etc., and then energy efficient equipment, like change your light bulbs, change your machinery, greening of buildings, especially if you're building new businesses, buildings or new housing, and also improve logistics and traveling, rather buy local. And then I was also add, like there was a study, or they're busy with a study for biofuels for our airlines, so that we can also decrease our emissions there, like our traveling emissions. And then also applying conservation practices, especially if you're a farmer or you're farming, and then encourage community and home food gardens. And then one last point that is not on the slide that I want to include is also when you buy food, only buy the stuff that you need to minimize food waste. Yesterday I was in a talk and I was shocked when I found out that an average person wastes 110 kilograms of food in a year. So we must really look at minimizing our food waste. Thank you so much. And I'm done, Renier. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Vanessa. And with that, it was our last speaker for the session. We really had to go over time due to the wealth of information that we had to share, and I think it would have done all of us an injustice if we didn't just give them an ear to hear as to what is happening at this stage. And from all the panelists, we could gather that there's a wealth of knowledge that's being shared across, a lot of research done, a lot of work that went into the issue of climate change up to date. Through our variety of speakers, I think there are a couple of things that stood out. And I think Britt started the conversation with a very profound slogan that she had, and saying that it is not a marathon. It is a sprint, and we are out of time. We are in the middle of it, and we need to do something. But then yet, listening to our speakers, you also realize that there's such a lot of initiatives, there's policies in place, we have strategies in place, draft strategies, and really a lot of effort went into it. The needs of women identified and the inequalities that they still need to address, and that we are still battling to get to and make sure that there's equal share in terms of access to resources, information, skills, job opportunities, and all of that. But then I think also core is the fact that climate change, and that is something that I referred to when we started the conversation, that I think climate change was something that we really didn't zoom into. And I think Panuswa said it very well in terms of saying that climate change has not been a popular topic to keep the concentration of the general public. And that really is the part And the question today is in terms of how do we take this further so that we can localize and make sure that our people within our communities understand the challenges that we are facing, and that we can no longer sit back, but we need the whole of society approach in terms of taking these things forward. There are beautiful projects that came out from each of these presenters. Tracy spoke about projects that can be done by utilizing natural resources around us, that can also boost the economy and that can also assist our women in terms of moving forward. So then there was the buzz that we also heard about. If you ask yourself, what is climate change? Climate change, like we heard, it is human inflicted. It is what we do. It is about the way we go about doing our business that causes the floods, the wildfires that get triggered by droughts. And what does these result to? It results to water shortages, inability to produce food, homes destroyed, and people displaced or dead from floods, and further health crises, and the list go on. So with that, I would really like to hear from our panel, and then also firstly from our viewers at this stage, whether there are any questions that you would like to pose to the panelists. I've noted that Puniswa had to leave us due to other commitments, but we do have the other panelists. And if there is any question specifically directed to her, you are more than welcome to also put that on paper and then just forward that to Renier, and then we can follow up in terms of getting back to you regarding responses and so forth. Are there any questions from viewers that we can attend to? Are there any in the message box, Renier? Because I can't seem to go up to the comments section and whatever were given through there. Are there any questions particularly captured within that section?
I think, yes, Deirdre, I think everybody's just busy processing all of that information. But I would just like to read some of the comments in this comment section. I think it was Farrell that said, indeed, men are responsible with patriarchy still rife. Men dominate in global business in representing capital greed at all costs, and the planet is paying the price for it. I think also, Shadei said, very informative discussion. What will save the world, like Britt said, people must come together and not wait. Also, another comment was, if a small municipality like Overberg is producing amounts of waste that Lizeth tells us, imagine that amount of across the municipal areas globally. And then there was a question, how do we educate people about this? I think it was Karen asked Lizeth, where can we get a list of environmentally friendly plants like the spec worm you mentioned? We can encourage residents in public spaces to grow these plants. And I think this is more a comment. I think we can all become a little more like Greta Thunberg. Look what we buy. Remember that it takes 22,000 liters of water to make a gene we are buying. Everyone must in the end do their bit. Otherwise, the earth will become more like C19, and everyone will be globally forced to do their bit. I think also, again, Kari just mentioned that the earth is sick because we are actually killing her directly or indirectly. She is not called mother for nothing. So yes, I like the theme that is being discussed. I think this was from Ivor, or Britt to Ivor, just wondering whether you have a map of all the efforts underway in the geographical space where you work. Could be useful to get an overview of the agency and assets that exist? And I would love just Ivor's input into this. I think, and Farrell again, this was to Puniswa, the gender justice link you make is important. The voices also young women in the context of the needs of systems change to challenge climate change. Yeah, I think those were some of the comments that were written in the group in the chats.
Okay, thank you for that, Renier. Then just again, I think an important aspect that Tracy also mentioned is that when we zoom into our local women in the communities, and you want to move them forward, creating the awareness about climate change, it cannot be done in isolation. You have to recognize the challenges that they are facing. You have to recognize their backgrounds, the culture impact, domestic impacts, and everything else that goes with it before you can actually move forward. But then the question also remains as to how can we, whatever is happening at this stage, all the good work done in terms of climate change, how can we give it a local flavor that will at least get through to our local citizens, making sure that they begin to realize that we each have a role to play. I'm thinking about the buzzwords that we hear all the time. We hear COVID all over every day. You know exactly what the symptoms are. You know exactly where to go. You know exactly what to do. When we speak about gender-based violence, it's topics that we hear constantly, issues of crime and substance abuse. These are all over. But how often do we hear that about climate change and the impact of that on our local communities? Do we know where to go when we find ourselves in situations, where to go for help, who to reach out to, what the referral pathway is, if there should be any? How do we make it more attractive to our communities and more aware, not only to our women per se, but our broader community, our young children at schools as well? How can we get that them involved? And maybe that is a question that I would like to pose to the panel, and really no one specific, but anyone from the panel that feels that they can respond are more than welcome to do so. Yes, Lizeth, I note your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to come back to Councillor Donald's question as to where we can get specboom. I can get it from one of my colleagues, Mr. Francois de Toy, and then we take it from there. Then we can talk further around question, but we can have some currently.
Thank you so much, Lizeth. So noted. And then Britt, I've noted your hand, and then Tracy would be after that.
I just wanted to say that even though we have been living with COVID for quite a long time, I think that there's still a lot of misinformation. So for me, education it's not such an easy thing. So the only thing I think that we can really do, and I mean, I am a person that works in education, is we really need to look at what we are teaching children from a very young age. And all our learning institutions really need to make climate change integral to what they are teaching. And I mean, I haven't done extensive research. I have worked at some universities, and you seem to find this in little pockets. You know, it's not that no one's doing it, but it's not widespread, and certainly not at schools. I mean, I did a little snap research for an essay that I wrote, and I asked a couple of my friends' children about climate change and various things. And one of the responses, you know, that, well, in fact, I got it from a few people that stuck with me, is the child said, "Oh, we learned about that last year." And then I said, "Well, what did you learn?" And he said, "I don't remember." So, you know, I think we have a problem with what we are learning and teaching right through, from early childhood development right up to higher education. So that just my response to that.
Absolutely true. So noted. And these are the things that we really seriously need to get around the table as well to see and look at the content and is it still relevant to what is needed for our young people to keep them up to date and up to par with where we are moving towards. I've also noted Faith Sand.
I think it's Tracy first and then Faith.
Tracy, yes, you may go.
Yeah, sorry, I just need to excuse myself because I have another commitment at 12:30. Yeah, but just in terms of, you didn't miss much of the I wasn't even aware that I was losing the audience, but I only had about 2 slides left, but Renier can share my presentation with the group. And just in response to, I don't know, Deirdre's question about how do we go forward planning, with communities and so on. I just want to mention that it's important that we remember not to plan for, but to plan with communities. That we take communities by the hand from the get-go and not involve them after the plans have already been made, because sometimes it just doesn't gel. Okay, but thanks, and please excuse me and enjoy the rest of the conversation.
Thank you so much, Tracy, and very valuable point. So noted, and thank you for being part of this discussion. And we will definitely have further engagements with you, because I'm sure that this is the first, but not the last engagement that we will be having of this nature. Thank you so much. Who was next online? I think it was Faith.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I would like to support Brit's input that education is quite fundamental. And I think alongside education, it's also getting political about it. Advocacy for people, society, to raise the issues of climate change to their leaders. And once leaders have made commitments, then hold them accountable in terms of the budget. How are they doing their budgeting? Where are they spending their money? Because I think climate change is it's actually a ticking time bomb. It's something that is going to come in our face if we're least prepared for it. But then it will also mean that it's a threat multiplier. We're going to have more pandemics happening. We're going to have more droughts, more disasters, more fires, etc. So people need to become political about it and vocal about it. Yes, the Greta Thunbergs, let us have the Greta Thunbergs of South Africa, the Greta Thunbergs from Cape Agala's municipality, from Overberg as a district municipality, all the people rallying around the climate change agenda. And again, how the links that can make with the curricula in the education, so that people are aware and are making informed decisions or informed participation or contribution about it. And again, I'll go back to our strategy, which I said, as we start to go out for stakeholder consultations, I think people should actually take that as an opportunity to raise their views, raise their voices, especially the women, so that they don't remain as invisible experts whose knowledge, whose information does not filter through to decision making. And as we know, everything else rises or falls on leadership. So we need to keep our political leaders accountable and on their toes regarding this imminent crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faith. Very important. And then the draft Western Cape Climate Change Response Strategy and the vision for 2050, and getting involved and our communities involved in terms of the discussion. Because I think the one issue that also stood out is that we need a whole of society approach, and that government on its own cannot do it, business on its own cannot do it, and the researchers and economists and everybody else cannot. We need everybody around the table to know as to how we can connect the dots. I've also noted Vanessa's hand.
I think you're okay. Now, I just wanted to add that, especially with the education part, I think that climate change, they should include it in school curriculums, especially at university levels also. I know Stellenbosch got like a climate smart center now, so you can do a master's or a PhD in climate studies. But we need our school children, because they're the leaders of tomorrow. If we're not there, who's going to look after the environment, and what's going to happen to our kids and our grandkids? So we need to start there, and we need to teach them that climate change is not about only planting a tree and then we're okay and we're fine. It's not about that. It's not about only recycling and then we're okay. It's much more than that. And we must also create a platform for them so that they can start being part of the discussions that we're having, because they're the ones that must come up with new ideas and technologies and all of that we need. So as our Deputy Mayor, she likes saying that we must create our own space at the table. But I think in terms of our younger generation, I think we must take their hand and let them run with us so that they can see what is this all about. And as we are promoting be safe and COVID this and COVID that, we must also start promoting climate change and show people the negative, the bad side of climate change so that they can actually realize that it's not just a textbook thing that people are discussing, but it's real, it's happening here, it's happening in Overberg, it's happening in Cape Agulhas. So yeah, that's all that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that input, Vanessa. Renier, I've noted your hand as well.
Thank you very much, Deirdre, and to all of the panelists. You know, it's I think the information that we received today was very valuable. And I think that, you know, what do we do? What's going to be the next step? You know, we have all the information, we have the statistics. You know, when we talk about COVID and all of these other things, I think it's irrelevant if we don't have a planet. So to the panelists, how do we move forward, you know, from the discussion? What will be the next step? What do we do to create more awareness? How do we educate? And what forms does it take to ensure that we bring greater awareness to climate change? Because it's only a few groups or select group of people that are talking about it. So how do we bring it home to the guy on the street? So what will be our next step? Just to all of the panelists, also from your fields, your work that you have done, what do you say? Well, how do we move forward from this?
I've noted Vanessa's hand. You may go.
Normally in my field, we also, when we started off with our projects, we, like, you know, people didn't support us because we were talking like a foreign language. But the more we make ourselves present at conferences, meetings, you know, asking for slots to talk about what's happening and presenting facts and showing them stats, I think the more they becoming like they know what's climate change. They can even tell you, oh, this is how it's affecting our farm and this is how it's affecting our area. And even if you want to do international trade, like, you know, sell your wine or your fruit like internationally, people ask, what's your carbon footprint? So we must make ourselves, we must demand a slot at meetings. We must demand a slot at talks where we can just talk about it, show facts, give stats so that people become more aware of the thing is real. As our Maya normally puts on Facebook, like the COVID stats, we must actually develop something like that and put the climate stuff on there and show this is how Overberg, this is how Cape Agulhas was affected by the recent floods or the droughts or whatever is happening. So yeah, we must use our digital platform to get the information out.
Thank you so much for that, Vanessa. Britt, I also noted your hand.
I just wanted to add on to that there are actually many groups already in existence, and, you know, globally and locally. And so I think that it's important, if people want to know more about it, is to join existing groups, because they do exist. You know, many of them not in the mainstream, but they absolutely exist, and they, you know, they are on social media. They do a lot of work. So I think that these things already exist. It's just a matter of finding them if people are not aware of them. And I mean, I can certainly, if it will help, if anyone's interested, I mean, I'm happy to write up a little list. You know, even children can join Fridays for Future. I mean, there are there are existing groupings. So I just wanted to add that on to Vanessa's. Thanks.
Thank you, Britt. So the question, and it would really be as to how do we begin to market these initiatives more aggressively in our community? How do we encourage more debates about this via our local newspapers, our radio stations? Social media is but one aspect. How do we make it part of our municipal accounts in terms of notices, in terms of what is happening, and there's a gathering coming up in terms of climate change discussions, and this will be the topic thereof. Faith, you are next.
Thank you, but I think you sort of preempted it. Yes, some of the points I wanted to mention, because looking at it in the climate change space, it's been the converted, and we find ourselves, that's a challenge when we come for meetings. It's always the same people that come, so we almost always speaking to the converted. So it's also something that we're trying to break away from at provincial government, to say, how do we start to make other people from the sister departments see climate change as something that's relevant to them and they need to be responding to it, and how do we actually make communities realize that climate change is something that will affect them? And we're starting to think of, okay, how do we leverage what's happening in social media for the youth? Is it possible that you start TikTok videos or get other youth, influence other youth to do TikTok videos on climate change rather than about the secular music or this coming movie? How do we then hold their hand to say, no, but let's make climate change fashionable again. Let's make climate change fashionable, a fashionable topic. And secondly, also, how do we actually use visual graphics? Because I think the other challenge with climate change is people think it's too scientific. It's something that's quite abstract and it's there. How do we make it visual graphics to show that, no, it actually affects how you build your house, the choice about where you buying your house today, the choice about the clothes that you buy today, the choice about the food miles, the food that you're consuming in your home, they matter because they determine where we are going tomorrow. How do we promote local? Because it's always fashionable to say, I got this from Europe, I got this from elsewhere. But how do we start to actually make it visual to say, no, local is lekker? How do we promote our local brands? And how do we promote our local entrepreneurs as well, so that they become something that the world reckons with? And yeah, so I think it's about, yeah, it's an ongoing challenge, but I think together we will work, we'll work and find solutions to actually addressing this. But it needs to be something in people's faces, whether the youth via whatever mainstream social media platforms they are using, or the other people in the other sector departments, about visualizing how climate change affects them directly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Faith, and that is exactly what we're talking about and what we're looking for, that aggressive approach in terms of making whatever is happening around climate change more visible, more in your face, and it calls for that creativity that we otherwise would not have been able to utilize. And it's like you said, these discussions happen in secluded areas where you only have certain people, but the ordinary citizen are often left out. I've also noted Vanessa's hand, and then after that, I will give an opportunity to Rolene to just also ask her question or give input.
I just want to, what Faith said, I just want to highlight that. She said that we must make use of graphs. And that's one thing that I also learned. When you speak to communities and farmers, you can't use scientific language. So the language is very important. So if we go to communities, you can't speak in scientific language. I can't go talk about metric tons of CO2, you know, all of that. People are going to look at you like, who's this crazy person? They don't know what you're talking about. So you must use examples. You must use a plain language so that everybody can understand.
Thank you for just emphasizing that point again, Vanessa. Over to Rolene.
Yes, thank you. I think a lot of what I wanted to say has been said. I think in terms of the simplifying the message and making the impact of climate change understood by everybody, in terms of, if we can't just say more dry days or more intense heat days. We have to say what it means for a person on the ground, what it means for a household in terms of if you don't have air-conditioned atmosphere, what do you need to put in place to make sure that there is no health risk? So it's simplifying that message is very important. But another thing that is very important is not just what community members should do in terms of making themselves climate resilient, but also getting the message across to local government, because they have a crucial role in safeguarding communities, making sure that it's not just one department planning climate change resilience, but all departments in all service delivery aspects planning for it. It can't be just an environmental thing or just a health thing. It needs to be across the board, and the way municipalities plan in the future, plan our human settlements, plan for new infrastructure, all those things need to be climate proofed. And I think that's a very important step that we need to take in how we go forward in terms of climate change response. Yeah.
Thank you for actually very valuable input made from your side in terms of the collaboration that we need, and it's literally from all spheres of government, but also then local government per se. If we think flooding, it is just not disaster management affected by it. It's humanitarian relief that we need to take care of. It's the health sector, everybody else that needs to take responsibility for that. So it is quite crucial that all of us get around the table and do joint planning moving forward and make provision. And we can no longer say that this is not going to affect us. Because it's been upon us for quite some time. We've experienced it in May during the floods. Last year, we experienced it. We noticed it in KZN in terms of flooding there. In 2017, we experienced the wildfires in Knysna happening. It's here. It's with us. And we can no longer ignore it. I don't know, Vanessa, I've noted your hand still up. Is that a new hand? Or is there more comment?
I'm sorry, that's an old hand.
Okay, then with that, I've also noted that we are running out of time, and I would like to hand over to Renier to just give through to us the concluding remarks for a very robust discussion that we had. And it is a pity that we didn't have more time to go into detail, but such a lot of information and important information shared at this stage. But really the start of great work, and I'm sure that this will allow us to put on the table a more integrated plan that will definitely have the local flavor with all the colors and photos and things that Faith referred to, but also then making sure that everybody is on board that needs to play their part in all of this.
Wow, thank you very much, Deirdre. Thank you very much for moderating the discussion. I think you did a pretty amazing job. That was superb. And also to the panelists, I think you guys covered a lot of the information. I think I've myself learned a bunch regarding climate change today. And we actually went 45 minutes over the time. Just shows that, 2 hours is not enough to talk about this. And that we need to have more conversations. We need to engage more. So usually what happens after webinars is that we have these amazing presentations, and the information gets shared with us, but what will be the next step? So how do we move forward from this? And this is actually where we want to go now in terms of, and just a suggestion maybe from the panelists and also from our guests in the room, maybe just quickly, just share a quick idea in terms of what do you think, what we need to do to go forward. I think some of you guys have mentioned practical things that we can do in terms of using social media to create awareness about climate change. When you go into buildings, do you see any posters about climate change? When you go around, how do we start conscientizing people of where we go? Sharing videos on TikTok, social media. Can we do street theaters, plays, pop-up theaters in order to create that sense of awareness, to get people talking about it? I think I've asked Britt in the chats in terms of she's got a nice booklet in terms of what is this got to do with the polar bear. And it's in very plain language, and I've read it, and it's very profound. You know, it's easy to understand. Can we start sharing of resources? You know, can we make a list of the organizations that works with climate change or that is part of the environmental programs? Can we share that with us and make sure that we are aware of the people working in communities? So maybe just around the table or around quickly in terms of maybe just an idea of what we need to do to move forward for the next step before we conclude our webinar. Any ideas? Rulien?
Yeah, it's not a new idea. It's just something we've already started earlier this year from the Overberg District Municipality side, is that we did create a platform for municipalities, not per se general society, so for municipalities to assist in terms of capacity building for climate change response. So we have a platform, and I would like the panelists, if you have information you would like us to share with municipalities, to send it through to us, and we will share it. And yeah, so there is a platform in terms of communicating information that is available. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Rulien. Yeah, I think what you need to just share the platform with us in terms of when does it meet, and exactly just give us a little bit more information regarding that. And I definitely think we can share the information and make sure that we participate. And, you know, if you have information, please share the information with us so that we can, you know, post it on our organization's websites, get people talking, send it in emails, so that people can become much more aware of it. If it's not in the psyche of people, people don't care about it. So it has to be in your face, as Kari has said in one of her chats. You know, we need to make sure people see it every day, so that they can be, you know, take the initiative. So guys, I think what we will do from the municipality side, we will do a write-up. We will do a little bit of a report where we'll also be sharing the information, the presentations, and also, you know, what will be the next step from the Cape Agulhas municipal side, and also bringing the relevant stakeholders, you know, back into the circle, into the space, to look at a way forward, because we need to have a practical step. We have the conversation, we have the information, we know the situation is bad, we know time is running out. So what are we going to do now? So that will be the position from the Cape Agulhas municipality, especially human development. So please be on the lookout for lots and lots of emails and lots of requests for follow-ups, to, you know, to make sure that we take this thing forward. Lizeth, I don't know if there's anything from your side, maybe a last word that you just want to add before we close our webinar.
Thank you, Renier, and thank you, the panelists and all the viewers. I also have to say that this session was a very insightful session for myself. I've learned a lot. And also I see how we can extend our stakeholder relationship with the rest of the team, and how we can work together on community projects with a focus of awareness in terms of climate change. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lizeth. If you enjoyed the webinar, just give me a thumbs up on the, just click just a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. This is awesome. Also, what we will do, we will send out a Google Forms, just a debriefing form, where we basically just ask guys to give feedback regarding the climate change webinar, where we need to improve. You know, we're always learning as we go along. We don't know it all, and that's why we always work together. So just give input in terms of where to improve, and also the next step. And if you maybe you feel like you want to write something, you want to write a paragraph about the webinar or the way forward, you're welcome to send it to my email address. we can also include it into our report. So yeah, guys, if there's nothing else, I would like to thank you all, each and every one of you that participated in the event today. To our guests, thank you very much for being patient and listening to the presentations and also the input. To our IT team, thank you very much for always availing yourself, you know, to make sure that the people get the relevant information, you know, there by sharing it and also live streaming it. To the organizers, thank you very much for everything that you've done. The panelists, Deirdre, the moderator, Deirdre, you did an amazing job. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. From the Overberg District Municipality, Britt, thank you very much. All the way from the Eastern Cape. We really appreciate the input and everything that you've done. And also, we really enjoyed that presentation. Lizeth Smith, thank you very much from the Human Development Department, Cape Agulhas Municipality, for always allowing the department to go into new directions and ensure that we stay on stuff that is relevant and to ensure that we bring communities together. Then Punyuzwa, in her absence, thank you very much for your presentation. And from Cape Nature's side, I think we will be engaging much more, you know, in future, working together. Then Tracy Lee Dennis, also in her absence, thank you very much to the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies. I think you guys did amazing work, and I believe that we can learn from the case study. Faith, from Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, please share with us your strategic documents, your presentation. I think it was amazing, the work that you guys are doing there at the department, and we need to echo it, you know, because it's important that we need to get that information to share it, you know, and post it on our website. Vanessa, last but not least, thank you very much. It's always amazing to me that when young women step up and you know, make their voices heard. To your department, thank you very much for all the research that you've done. And again, please share the research with us. That being said, guys, please enjoy your weekend. If you're driving, drive safe. If you're at home, stay safe. Please ensure that you we get vaccinated. Please ensure that you wear your mask. If you're in public, please adhere to the social distancing protocols, etc. Thank you very much, guys. And we will definitely be having a follow-up. So please don't be a stranger. And like as somebody said, don't be an expert where you are quiet in a corner. Please share your work and share your experience. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And I think we had a great webinar. Until next time, guys. Goodbye.